You're listening to Japanese Baptist Church in Seattle, Washington.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to JBC Connect. We have another episode for you, and we have a wonderful guest today. It's the very talented artist, Sarah Kane, who is also one of our artists in residence in this past year with Bremen Cascadia. And for those of you who don't know what an artist in residence means with Cascadia, it was basically Sarah got to be with our community for about a year. And as she was with us, she worked with some our individuals to our congregation members to create some art and also to be a part of some of our activities like our Sela gathering. And she also got to share about her art with our community as well. And it's wonderful, it's profound, there's so much to it, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So let's just jump into it. Sarah, thank you for joining us. And I thought before we go too far into conversation, it'd be really great to start off with folks who don't know you. So maybe you could just introduce yourself a bit, like who you are, what you're doing, and a bit about you as an artist.
So my name is Sarah Kane. I live in Seattle, was pretty much raised here, and I have family also that was raised here as well, so like second generation. And yeah, I do a lot of different types of art, mainly in the realms of photography and ceramics. And I really enjoy like history and historical things. And yeah, so that's where I get a lot of my information, but then also current events and stuff as well.
Uh-huh. So I found it really interesting in that as I got to know you, you have like a very diverse skill set. Like, I mean, I also learned like, professionally you are a coder, right? I mean, you write software. So how did you, tell us a bit about the journey of like how you discovered all these different, very different mediums.
Right. So I went to University of Washington, and I actually majored in photography and communications. So I was like a fine arts major, and then I went on a couple of study abroads. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll get a communications major as well. And so that's like was kind of my background. And then later on, I had the desire to create kind of like information spots for people. For select groups of people. And that kind of led me down the path of programming because generally speaking, to make a website, you have to, in some cases, know how to program. And so I found a program that did that. And so I took that. It was like a boot camp, a coding boot camp, a year-long boot camp. And so I went into that. And then from there, I started with programming. And so that's kind of how I got to programming from. And also it was a skill that I could use to support my art habit. So.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Because like for myself as a musician producer, I feel like technology is so essential now to what I do in music. Like I actually have to learn little bits of like how operating systems work. I have to like troubleshoot, and I feel like for artists nowadays, it's almost like an essential thing that you have to have some kind of savvy with technology. Like,
a little
can't
bit.
really get around it. Yeah. Uh-huh. But then, so how did you discover ceramics then?
I took my first ceramics class. I took at the community college while I was attending, and I really enjoyed it. It was a hand building class. Really enjoyed it, and I got pretty good marks in that class. And so every time I got every time I got a chance, I would just take ceramics classes. So I took some at UW while I was there, learned a lot in that class as well, with technique and everything. And then after I was finished with college, I graduated, I continued to go up to the community college in Bellevue to take classes there as well. So that's just something I pursued throughout my whole education or formal education. So yeah.
Do you feel like there's maybe a connection there somewhere between like photography and ceramics? Like why? Because I mean, they're very, they're worlds in themselves, right? Like, I mean, you could get lost in either one easily, but do you feel like there's a connection for you?
So Photography for me, I feel it's kind of a observation, and it's very, I feel like one dimensional. It's a very flat kind of medium.
Hmm.
Whereas ceramics is two dimensional and it's not as observational. It's more like I'm in it, right? So I'm working it. So I really can't say I find any kind of crossover, except that oftentimes when I am making ceramic pieces, I will often display them as in one dimensional kind of flat ways because I come from
Ah.
like a photography background, not so much like in a sculpture way. So I make ceramics to display in like a one dimensional way, even though they're more two dimensional. So kind of breaking out of that one dimensional with my ceramics has been a little bit of a challenge because I never really thought of it like that, as like sculpture. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I mean, I hope people can get to see your photo book, I guess, that you had done of ceramics. And well, I don't know if it's ceramics, right? It's hard for me to describe what it
Right.
was,
Yeah,
but
it's a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
it's interesting because like it definitely wasn't you just showcasing your sculpture ceramics. It was actually what was just as significant was like the composition of the shot. Like it was created. These objects were created to be photographed,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
and I think that kind of talks about too, like maybe your approach to um, like ceramics is like it's not like that thing isolated in itself. It's like meant to be captured in a way through photography. So it kind of explains like how 3D and 2D come
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Can. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a pretty neat thing. And the other thing I was thinking, like when you're saying that, is like I find like I pursue certain art forms because it balances the other one. Like I actually really like visual art as well, and had I not gone to music, I would have done that. And some like it's funny to say, but like I love visual art because it doesn't make any sound. Like as a musician, like I get kind of tired of just like
The
sound
sound.
all the time. I'm just like, it's just too much. So I find it very like cathartic to just do some kind of artistic discipline that involves no audio and vice versa, you know?
Right.
So I wonder if that like having those extremes, the way you described it, like it kind of like balances each other in a way.
Yeah. I think they use kind of different parts of my brain.
Yeah, yeah, that's
It's,
exactly what I mean. Yeah, uh-huh.
yeah. It kind of gets different parts like buzzing, and so that's always nice to use different parts of my brain.
Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it. And I feel like it's almost like when you engage all parts of the brain, that like the brain as a whole works better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, um, like I can imagine like if you're like working really hard with 3D all the time, like you want to do something 2D and then vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Sometimes TV kind of simplifies things a little bit, which I like.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So.
Uh-huh. So I wanted to continue just talking about your art. One of I guess my first introductions to your art was we were at an artist retreat
Mhm.
and we were all going around showcasing your work. And um, I have to admit, like, when I meet you, you're very like low key, like, you're not actively like selling, like who you are as an artist. Like, I really like that about you're very approachable, very down to earth when I talk with you. But so I wasn't prepared when you very casually just kind of showed us like, oh, here's my art piece. You're just handing it out to everyone. And I have to admit, like, it filled me with so many emotions. And I've never forgotten being almost like ambushed by it.
Right. Right.
It was such a strong, so many things to unpack. And I'm not joking about this. Like, I still think about it even to this day. And especially right now with everything going on. And I want to talk about that in a moment. But maybe you could just describe what this artwork is, because I don't want to talk too much about it
Yeah.
for you.
Actually, I can go and get the pieces so I can show them.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I can do that. I'll be right back. Let me just.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of what they look like. They're
Hmm.
cards, and they have a front and a back. So the front, for people who cannot hear, um, usually has like a picture of um, children, right? And the children are, generally speaking, wearing like fancy clothes. And these fancy clothes like are taken from fashion plates in like the Victorian era, right? So, and then on the back, and then, so it's a layered kind of, it's a layered like card. And so in back of like, on the background for the children, there's like um, text. And the text talks about, well, actually the text is like old slave advertisements from like newspapers during that time, during slavery. And so, yeah, and these are all photographs taken of people during the Victorian era, which is essentially like the slavery era. Yeah, and then on the back of the card, we have like the slave advertisements. So we have like, this one is to be sold, a boy and a girl about 11 years old. Monday, 3rd of November, 1760. And then this one is for sale, a likely Negro boy about 12 years old is offered for sale for life. He'll be sold low to any person who will engage not to sell him out of state. And so, yeah, on the back of the cards are like advertisements for pretty much the human trafficking, which was very, which is common and legal in the United States up until about 150 years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then so you were kind of like digitally editing the text and then these images of the clothing. Now, did you put the clothing on the children, or was this actually pictures of children in clothing?
I put the clothing on the children
Okay.
because when I was younger, I was really interested in like historical fashion. That's kind of where like my history kind of background comes from. And I was like very interested in it. And I bought like books on it and I would really study it. But then when I kind of went into my own history, I'm a slave descendant and on both sides of my family. Realizing that my ancestors who were kids, like probably wouldn't be wearing these clothes, but they probably picked the cotton that was used to make these clothes. And so for me, like putting it over the kids, which is kind of an ironic kind of like twist in that like, yeah, you know, you would pick the cotton and be sold to pick cotton, but you would never actually be able to wear these beautiful clothing. So.
Right. And I appreciate you actually holding them up because like I'm going to show some videos throughout the video of this, but like you holding it just shows like how they're so tiny. And so like when you were handing this around, just talking from my experience, I was like, from a distance, they look like playing cards to me, like maybe game cards or something like that, or you know, someone had mentioned like sports cards, something very, I don't know, very innocuous, I guess, and like very portable. Um, so when it kind of landed in my hands as you're passing it around, I was like, oh, what's this? So I just look at the picture. Oh, it's a child, because like I'm not looking at the writing or anything yet.
Right.
And they're like, okay, it's a black child, and then oh, it's clothing, and then my mind is racing. It's like, what's going on here? And there's some writing in the background. And behind the kids, I can't fully see it. There's some keywords, so I flip it around to wonder what's going on, because that's what you do with playing cards. There's usually some information at the back. Yeah. And then I'm reading is that, that's when like this kind of like, I describe like this sledgehammer hits you. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because it's horrific to read about this, right?
It is, yeah.
And the way it's I guess, you know, the font and like the old timey and just the unapologetic nature of how they're just advertising this, you know, then it makes you want to go back to the other card again, right? The other side of the card. And so like, why are these kids dressed up? You know, like what's going on? Like, who dressed them up? Like what's going on here? And so like, I think all of those, like, it just keeps generating more questions, and
Right.
it just talks about class, about power, um, about the vulnerability of children, um, just the horrors of racism, and just it keeps sprawling. And so um, I don't know. And then because you had like a stack of them, you didn't have like just one.
Right. It was a step.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. And then you just keep seeing more and more of these. It just fills you with so many things, so many questions. I'm curious. Like, I've had the privilege of seeing you hand these out into, I guess, yeah, two different occasions. Once at our church, and then once with the artist group. Could you maybe describe to me, like, what are some of the reactions of people and other groups that you've tried to, like, display this with?
Yeah. So it's a lot of silence. A lot of silence. I pass them out, and for a while, people don't really say anything. And then when they do start to speak, they don't know what to say, you know? And that's been kind of like the main kind of reaction that I've gotten.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that? Because that's an interesting
It is
response.
interesting. Yeah. Um, so I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I think it's more, I understand that these do like, there's a lot of layer to this. And this is a very, although they're very small, right? They're not very big.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it said to me that they kind of did what I intended for them to do, and I think that it hit people, even because these are a couple years old. And even then, when things were in this country were like pretty cool, wasn't much going on, people were still very shocked and deeply affected by them when they
Yeah.
read them,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So
Right. Right. Because like they're I mean, this is probably an awful thing, but the Black Lives Matter, like the actual phrase of it is like perhaps 5, 6 years old, but it definitely lost a lot of momentum in a way, just in terms of like mind share, I guess, in social
right,
consciousness. But it's interesting is that what you did with this is like it transcends like any like social
right,
media trend or a hashtag or something, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's very impacting, and in light of obviously now there's a resurgence in the awareness. Uh, it has so much. There's a deeper weight to it, right? But it's always been weighty.
yeah,
Um, and I did want to say maybe also for the readers, like I think something interesting too is like when you present them, which is really I think is wonderful, is that you're very like nonchalant about it. Like you don't even preface them. I noticed
right,
you don't even
right,
set them up for it because, and that's what kind of makes it more powerful in a way is and you don't really let people off the hook. Like you don't prepare them or yeah, you don't do anything really. You just hand them
right.
out and you just
I'm not,
decide.
to be honest, I'm not sure how I would prepare them because for me, even for
Yeah,
me, it's hard for me kind of to talk about it because
yeah,
there are so many layers, right?
yeah,
There's just so many layers. There's so many like, contradictions. There's so many like
yes,
ironic things that happen that like I don't even have a good way to prepare people. So I'm just like, you know what, I'll let you all, deal with it, and which I think people can. I think they
yeah,
can. And it is hard at first, but you know, um, yeah, I think people can handle it. Yeah,
yeah. And I think like the thing that really strikes me is about like we were talking again about like how the cards are small. So it's very non-threatening way, like and it just feels very familiar. It's like, oh yeah, kids play with cards, we play cards for games. Like it just feels very domestic and very safe. So when you finally see what this card is, like, for me it's like a lament, it's like a prophetic rebuke too in a way, right? it's
but yeah,
it's 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 dangerous, right? Like it's a small thing but it's on fire, and it makes me also realize, like, that's how we also view children in a way. Like we just kind of really can just treat them like small objects or like kind of discount them, or that's why they're so vulnerable,
right, yeah,
but easily like just like the cards are easily like transacted or passed around, like the whole thing of trafficking is like
Mhm.
children can be like this too.
Yeah.
And all of those things are just like hitting me. And so it is definitely one of the most powerful works, like, and I'm not saying this lightly, like it's one of the most powerful works like I've encountered in the past while. Perhaps because also I know you more, but yeah. So this is probably like a good place to segue since we're talking about it. How, with everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter right now, right? Like, and obviously, I had a brief conversation with you at the retreat, um, and your investment in a lot of these matters. How do you feel? How do you feel about your voice right now in this current time and what's going on?
Right. That's a good question. And I don't really know because I've been on my own social media, which is not even that active. I've been super quiet. Like I haven't really said anything. And I think the main reason why is because I was waiting for everybody to die down and
Yeah.
then go back to normal, right? Because I feel like this kind of uprising, I guess, is like a cycle. But like after everybody goes back to normal or they don't feel threatened anymore, then people just kind of forget about it. But my life, doesn't, and the things that I worry about and am concerned about doesn't really change. And so I think for me, I was just mainly hoping for it to like die down because I was like, I've seen this before, right? My parents have seen this before.
Right.
And, it's 2020 and these things are still happening. Obviously, how we go about doing it doesn't really work, you know? So, yeah, mainly I was just like, I just want to go back to normal.
Mm-hmm. And and it's weird that you say the word normal, right? Because now we're all kind of like in question, like what is normal, really? Um, but I think what you're talking about really makes sense, right? Because you know, having been connected with like, for instance, like one of our sister churches is like the historic Mount Zion Baptist Church, which was very active in like civil rights movement. And so when I think of like my friends there, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's like they've been doing it like it's not like a new thing for them. It's not a hashtag for them. They've been doing it before hashtags, um, and that's I guess that's also frustrating, right? When it feels like you get all these people who have now finally become allies, which you appreciate in a way, but then in a way it's frustrating too. Is like, well, this is more than a trend, okay? Like what this community goes through is not just for a season. Like just
Right,
because we became aware of it, it's all going to get solved or something.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and I mean, I think one of the really poignant things, like I got to hear the podcast of the recording of it, the memorial for George Floyd, and all these parents of children who died from violence,
Hmm.
Black families, they were all there, and it was just really powerful. It was like a reminder. Is like, look, I mean, George Floyd, like for whatever reason, George Floyd became the center of a lot of this, but um, he's not exceptional, unfortunately.
Right, right.
Uh, and there's so many more stories like him, but we just chose this one story to represent many stories.
Yeah.
So I can imagine like it's hard. It must be exhausting, right? I bet everyone's kind of asking like, give your statement on this now. It's like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I think now I'm just kind of used to it. I just wait for it to
uh,
happen. Wait for people to reach out and start acting differently than they usually do.
right,
It passes by and I'm like, okay, and
yeah,
among other Black people, we have like our jokes about it.
hmm,
And so yeah, it's like I think it's just so routine that like it's like I don't know waves like when you're at the beach and the waves come in and
yeah,
then kind of go out again. It's like a routine. You wait for it to come, you wait for everybody's reaction, and then they go out again, and then you know
hmm, hmm,
everything's back to quote unquote normal, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of like the challenge that I'm facing with my church because, with the incarceration, like all the Japanese Americans being sent to the camps, you know, JBC has been thinking about, you know, racial justice and equity for a long time, but, from an Asian American lens, which is very different, right?
Right.
But I try to remind people, I was like, look, this is very important what's going on right now, but it just reminds us like we need to keep going on what we've been always doing, like, and like we lose integrity if we just suddenly shift course or like join like trends or something. But like if we can
Right.
just stay like rooted in what we've always been trying to push to do, then there's something really powerful in that, and like I appreciate the fact that, like, your art was created not when it was like a really popular trendy time to do it, but it was
Right.
just like, and because you did it like in a time that you did, it just transcends, it's so much more important right now. But then, like, as you said, like even when the wave, like, the tide recedes, it's still going to be powerful
Right. Yeah.
because it transcends like a trend or like one political event or something like that. um, do you, when you're creating, is that, because that's a heavy burden, right? I mean, I feel like for myself as Asian American, like everyone's kind of getting in my face, like, hey, can you talk about like Asian racism right now? Because everything going on with like people calling China's virus. Like, I feel like I have this spokesperson for Asians.
Mhm.
Do you feel that pressure right now, like in your art, like that people around you, like, I mean, really well-intentioned allies, but they're trying to like force you to be the spokesperson of all people, like, in your community.
I think that's probably why I didn't really share any of my art during this time because
Yes.
I was
Okay.
like, I don't really want to be that,
Mhm.
and so I'll just wait until everything dies down and then I'll put something up. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's probably a deliberate thing on my half. Is like I just didn't. I was not gonna put anything up or anything. I was just quiet because I'm like, it's not to me. It's like I didn't really feel that the outcry was really genuine,
Mhm.
and so like I don't want to be just part of the chorus. Um, Especially when like it happens all the time. Like it's not uncommon,
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I was like, I'll just not put anything up.
Mhm.
Um, because not to say that I didn't make art during this time because I did, but I was not going to try and share it with anyone. So
Mhm. Yeah, I felt a sort of similar tension too, because I I was like, I don't want to just suddenly just be doing black squares and, like on my social media feed and all this stuff to act like, oh wow, like, did you know, kind of thing, like, this is going on right now. It's like, because like Americans don't really have an excuse, right? I mean, you
exactly, yeah,
you you knew all this
right,
time. I mean, don't, why are you so shocked right now? Like, you've had so
exactly,
many opportunities, so
hmm
many profound people like speaking prophetically to you,
exactly, yeah,
um, uh, I almost didn't want to give it attention in a way, but I
right.
did, and so I felt this real, it's hard for me to explain. So do you feel then in your art a pressure sometimes to, because like I feel like these cards thing, it came from a very natural, real place. It wasn't like this agenda. You didn't feel like I gotta do this, like, to talk about this issue. Like, it was just very real. And I think that is something that is very true of all your art. So I wonder, do you do you feel sometimes this pressure, like, I need it to be informed by, like, um like justice issues, or is it something that just comes on its own?
Right. Usually it's not necessarily justice issues because I feel that like the word justice issues or that phrase is like this is just life for some of us,
Yes.
right? So when I'm doing these cards, I'm essentially just going back to my family history.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's all slavery for the vast majority of the people, and so it's not really a justice issue; it's just life issue, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, so in that case, I don't really feel any pressure to like do like historical piece or whatever. mainly because that's just my history, right? There's really nothing else,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
just life for me, and from an artist standpoint, it's a powerful place to be able to tap into, and I don't like to like heavily rely on it because I tend to it might make me fatigue, and other people also kind of like, okay, back to that. But at the same time, if I'm drawing from my history, there's nothing else to draw from, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah.
That's no, that's really great because my interview with May too is like a lot of her art is not about an issue. I was leading a little bit with that question, so I apologize. But I was trying to actually get to this. Is like a lot of it is about identity, isn't it? It's just about finding like who am
Yeah,
I, where am I from, where am I going, and if you really honor those questions, like it'll just take you
exactly. Yeah.
things, right? And that's what it did for you because you actually had an interest in history, right? Just and you had mentioned that you had this interest in fashion and aesthetics, right? um,
Yes, yeah.
and then you can't help but let all those things, those curiosities of how you're created by God, like if you just honor those things that God's put in you, it'll take you somewhere, and it took you to this amazing
Yeah.
place with these cards. um, and I guess maybe the last thing, there's so much I want to talk about this. We definitely should talk more on this subject.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling kind of this thing that I'm seeing like social media with a lot of my peers that I follow who are artists, that there is this, I feel a pressure sometimes, like our art must be protest right now, and
Right.
it must be prophetic. And like, I agree. But I hesitate in a way. Um, And I wonder, now that you're not like a new artist, like you've been doing art for a number of years, and you studied pretty rigorously like a lot of different art forms. What would you say to like a younger artist who was trying to figure out the balance between like art and protest?
Art and protest. I think what I would say to them is don't feel pressured to do anything based on like maybe what other people are saying. If protest is something they're very passionate about, then definitely do that. But if not, don't feel that you need to do it just because everybody else is doing it. And oftentimes I feel that like when you're going against the grain, like everybody's protesting now
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. But if you're protesting when no one is protesting, that could, be a little bit more impactful. So I would say if if you feel the need to protest, definitely do it. But if not, like don't feel pressure to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do it at this in this area feels what's right for you. That's what I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a lot of wisdom, because I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, right? Like if it's more about like you need to be really sincere to who you are, right? And I think when you are, like, it's going to take you to places where you're going to actually go against the grain of like the bigger story of society, right?
Yeah.
And you have to honor yourself by like going into that tension and that battle. And when you do that, that'll be protest.
Right.
Um, when I start to really be honest with like who I am and like where do I see the pain in my journey and what's going on, what I've connected with, I think it just becomes more real, and it transcends time. I feel
He does.
when
Yeah.
I feel like the real powerful pieces for sure are the ones that are coming from a deeper place than just like a historical circumstance or something like that.
Right.
Now, there
Oh,
are some really powerful protest works,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
so we're not against those, obviously, but um, it needs to come from a very like authentic place, I think. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think good protest works tell a lot of truth. So if
yeah,
you're telling truth at any time during, you know, the year or whatever, truth telling is always always a good protest.
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Whenever it is.
yeah. Um, there's a member in our congregation. He's older, but he's been very active in Asian American uh, like racial equity movements. And he, like, one of the things he always says to me is like, tell the truth always,
Right.
tell me the truth always. And look where it got him. Like he went to all these different places, doing all kinds of things, just being committed to telling the truth. And I think maybe wrapping up this, I feel like art and prayer is there's a really interesting connection between, because what we're talking about right now is about, I think prayer is most powerful when we're most authentic to ourselves and we're most honest to ourselves and to God. And I feel like then art is best when it's like that too. And so for me, sometimes like art is prayer in a lot of ways. It's kind of just because like, you can't control prayer. Like I think true prayer isn't like, some people talk about prayers like pray for this so I can get that. But like, that's kind of like a real superficial view of prayer. But a lot of prayer is about like, find out who you are, find out who God is and see where it takes you, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And it takes you to really, um, amazing places you never would have imagined. And I feel like art does the same thing too.
It does. Yeah.
Because like I feel like that those cards that you made, it wasn't like you premeditated, like, okay, I'm gonna make this card thing, it's gonna make people feel like this and that. And that.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you just kind of followed where it took you.
Yeah. I
And
followed. Yeah. And also the interesting thing is that like I followed just like my different interests, like what I was interested in, and
yes.
that kind of led to,
Yeah.
to this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just following who you were, right? Like those are like sincere things like you've been passionate about for a long time.
Yeah.
You didn't like look into those or discover your love for fashion at that time. It was like
Right.
it was way before.
Right.
So the time was just right for you to do that. Yeah. So I think there's a lot there that I really appreciate, and I just want to say again, like how much I appreciate this art, and I hope you have more platforms to share it in the way that you do. It's really profound, and it's something I'm thinking about so much even now, and I will think, long after the hashtags are gone.
Right.
It's going to like really leave an impression on me. So it's a real honor to uh, have had you as a artist in residence, and I hope there's more ways that we can connect. And
Oh
I
yeah.
would love to, yeah, and I would love to talk more about this because you
Okay.
have such a great perspective on so many things. So
I love talking. So.
yeah, this has been amazing. This has been really wonderful. It's been much more than I had hoped for, and I'm really thankful for your time. So
Cool. Thank
thank you
you.
again. This has been an amazing episode of JBC Connect. Thank you again to Sarah Kane, and I'll just list your website on the video as well. And please get connected and follow her. She's a wonderfully talented artist. So definitely more to come, I'm sure. So thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.